Stephen Okun is the Chief Executive Officer of APEC Advisors. That's a public affairs consultancy. He's also a former Deputy General Counsel in the US Department of Transportation. Joins us now from Singapore. Good to have you with us on the programme, sir. If the Americans have a strategy about how to deal with China, do you think China has a strategy to deal with the US?
Well, look, China has treated the U.S. as an adversary. That is basically the consensus view of Democrats and Republicans now. The difference with the Trump administration versus the Biden administration approach is that the U.S. is going to treat China as an adversary right back, and it is going to do so in a bilateral fashion as opposed to working with partners and allies in a multilateral fashion, and also recognizing that, or not recognizing as the Biden administration did, that there are reasons to compete with China, to cooperate with China, and not just confront China. So it is what China has done is where the U.S. reaction is, and the Trump administration is going to treat China as an adversary, as his choice for Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has said.
OK, well, yeah, I'll just jump in there because, I mean, we can take one point at a time. I mean, the rhetoric, as you say, from those who seem to be in prominent cabinet positions like Rubio, see China, as you say, as an adversary. Beijing should be treated differently. I mean, we've seen China weather the storm before, so why take on this tack as such? I mean, will Trump be advised that this is the best way, or does he have his own ideas about how he might like to bring the cabinet along with him?
Oh, no, I mean, I think it is very clear that they don't think China has been treated tough enough. It started with the Trump administration with select tariffs on, 30% of certain Chinese products. It is now going to go up, and the Biden administration kept that. That did not change under the Biden administration. But instead of targeted tariffs, we're now going to get blanket tariffs, or close to blanket tariffs on China of 60%. It is going to be very different. It is going to be more of a confrontational approach when it comes to where China has violated international law, such as in the South China Sea. I think you'll get to see even closer relations between the U.S. and the Philippines as a result, and they're already very strong under the Biden administration. So it is going to continue where we have been, except it is going to be tougher. It is going to be harder. And the Trump administration approach, this America First administration approach, policy approach, is not opposed to decoupling. And you expect to see more of that through investment restrictions and an expanding of this, small yard high fence that we've seen when it comes to restricting investment and trade between the U.S. and China.
It's interesting, actually, you preempted my next question, which actually, we can tweak slightly, because you talked about the fact that there is this aggressive stance from China when it comes to the South China Sea. We also see that if China is, you might say, attacked on a trade front, and we expect this from the US, do you then see China saying, right, if you're going to attack me on the trade front, I'm going to put pressure on you on the diplomatic front, and that includes the South China Sea, human rights issues, which China is often lambasted over when it comes to Xinjiang, and obviously accused over a lot of cybercrime too. I mean, there are other ways that China can get back at the US, but it's not off the hook in any way when it comes to these issues being raised either through trade or through politics.
Yeah, look, of course China is going to retaliate. Look, we saw in 2020 when, the presumably incoming Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, as a senator, sponsored the Uyghur Forced Labor Protection Act, took very tough stances against China when it came to Hong Kong, and they sanctioned Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is under sanctions by the Chinese government, and so they certainly have taken action in result of U.S. action, a counteraction, and you're going to expect to see more of it, as you just said. You're going to have retaliation on tariffs, of course, when it comes from China to the U.S., and you may see export controls on Chinese goods going to the U.S. So you have tariffs on incoming U.S. products. You'll have export controls on outgoing Chinese products. And look, China is going to look to have better relations with its neighbors, with the EU, presumably with Japan. And you saw that with China's announcement that they're going to host APEC. So yeah, China is going to retaliate directly against the U.S. and it's going to look for partners that are also going to be impacted by this America First approach.
And Steve, just very briefly, because we're coming to the end of time with you, sadly, are there any red lines for Beijing that the US knows it can't cross?
Well, I mean, I think from a trade perspective, probably not. From an economic perspective, probably not. From a sanctions perspective, probably not, because we've seen all of that already. Of course, the largest issue out there is Taiwan diplomatically. The approach of the U.S. of strategic ambiguity towards Taiwan in question of would it respond to China attacking, would it respond to Taiwan declaring independence, and the U.S. keeps that strategic ambiguity. No reason to believe that's going to change anytime soon. The Trump administration kept that in its first term. So I don't think you'll see those red lines, which, of course, everybody knows both ways to get crossed. But it is going to be turbulent at a minimum in terms of the global economy.
Oh, it'll be very interesting to see what happens post-January the 20th. For the moment, Steve Okun, thanks for joining us from Singapore.